Everyone, my name is Amber Montes Kelly, and the product I'm presenting on is the solar-powered water filtration system. Looking at the table of contents, we're going to cover some background, not only on the country I chose, Brazil, but also the product itself, discuss the preliminary business plan as well as the final business plan. First thing we're going to talk about is the need for these water filtration systems. So why solar-powered water filtration system? So if we're looking at Brazil, there is a change in climate that is leading to evaporation, which then is reducing the reservoir water levels in that country. Why solar power? Well, solar power is contributing to about 1% of the national power. It doesn't require any type of chemical, and it will not produce any waste or contribute to the already existing landfills in Brazil. More important, solar-powered water filtration systems can be located in off-grid communities, which then would improve the quality of life of rural communities as well as remote. A more significant key point as to why water filtration systems are significant is we have 1.8 million people who die each year from illnesses caused by contaminated drinking water. And according to WHO, the World Health Organization, we have over 2 billion people that lack the ready access to safe water at home. Market for this industry. Now some product background. These water filtration pods are solar, and what that means is that it uses the sunlight to charge contaminated or to change contaminated water into essentially safe drinking water. And it does this by using the sunlight, and as the sunlight increases the temperature of the water becomes vaporized, which then leaves the contaminants behind. Now, each water filtration system can hold about 5,000 liters of drinking water. In addition, it also provides as a Wi-Fi hub, and people can access Wi-Fi within a half-mile radius. So here's an example of what a solar-powered water filtration system looks like. So it's about 40 feet long and weighs about 15 tons. And depending on the solar and wind condition, it can provide electricity of 1,200 watts, which would be great for local villagers or remote villagers to power lights, cell phones, and computers to communicate. Now, a main component of these water filtration systems is the photovoltaic panels that feed electricity into these internal batteries. These are also known as PV. Now, PV is made up of a semiconductor material, which would be produced in Brazil, that's used to convert sunlight into electricity directly. Okay, so the demographics for Brazil. Brazil is a densely populated country with over 200 million people. It is the 5th largest country, and according to the Borgen Project, 6% of Brazil's populations live in favelas. Favelas are essentially the ghettos of Brazil, and there's 1,000 favelas in Rio and 1,600 in São Paulo. The reason why this is significant is that we can assume that in these favelas that they lack the essential water and purification systems to remain healthy and needed. So investment opportunities for Brazil is that if we look at a report in 2018, the FDI inflows increased about 2%. As well as Brazil is the 4th host economy in terms of FDI inflows. If we're looking at just Latin American countries, Brazil is attracting more than 40% of the total inflows of that region. Now, the table to the right, I've highlighted the investment for 2017. So the investment sectors, if we look at the treatment and distribution water, is only 1.6%. Now, this is relatively low, but we can see this as a great opportunity for investment because this market has not been tapped out or overly invested, unlike electricity and gas, which is at 20.9, and industry at 30.9. Compared with other countries, Brazil has been receiving a lot of FDI because of the assets that are for sale. Local shareholders and companies are offloading these assets because of the financial distress of the company, of the country, as well as the corruption that is being investigated. One thing that we do have to consider is the fact that Brazil does have a political and social corrupt system with the government. Despite that, they are open to foreign investment. Trade is moderately important to Brazil, and if we combine both their export and import, it equals approximately 25% of their GDP. Now, looking specifically at the solar industries, it continues to grow. Over 3 million people worldwide are are directly or indirectly employed by the solar energy sector, which is very promising for us when we go to launch in Brazil. The risks for launching our overseas company in Brazil is the taxation and bureaucratic process. They do have a rigid labor legislation. Government is involved, and because government can be viewed as corrupt, they tend to promote political and social objectives rather than economic ones. Now, looking at the units themselves, the units have a 10-year lifespan before they require maintenance. Now, this could be costly since these pods in and of themselves are not the most cost effective since they're just brand new to the market. In addition, we have the landscape issues, environmental awareness that we have to keep in mind. The landscape fragmentation can affect the vegetation and create barriers for those that rely on agricultural for employment. Lastly, in order to prevent environmental damage to these solar PVs, there is a need for strict and consistent regulation over the entire life cycle of these infrastructures. Let's look at the preliminary business plan. Culturally, this is going to provide new opportunities for the people of Brazil with new jobs. It can secure individuals, start businesses, and just assist with manufacturing and assembly positions. With regards to the environment, not much change there because it's not contributing or adding to the existing landfills or waste. As mentioned earlier, these solar-powered water filtration systems can be used off the grid for rural communities, which then would improve the quality of life for these remote areas. Brazil holds roughly 12% of the global freshwater resources. However, this is unevenly distributed in the southern and eastern region. There is a shortage of clean drinking water supplies there. And if we look at the projection over the next 5 years, water filtration technology is expected to grow within Brazil. Strategy is just mentioned earlier with the projection growth for the water filtration system, but we can also look at the investment in solar power. Now, the grid to the right shows from 2014 to 2015 a growth of almost, over 10% for solar investments. And if we look at the GHI, which is the global horizontal irradiance, if we look at the region of Brazil, we see it has an average to above average GHI, which for a solar company, that's definitely a contributing factor for that location. Last thing we're going to talk about is the cost of the PVs. I mentioned that the units are relatively expensive. We're looking at $40,000 per one pod. However, what we can see though is that over the years that these costs are decreasing, and according to the graph, it's dropped 59% over the last decade. So the cost of solar power is continually decreasing each year. Now, Brazil has installed some PV capacity, which was around 230 megawatts. And even though the incentives for solar energy sectors are gradually being scaled back, I think with the decrease in solar, it'll offset that as well. Now, the demand for these solar-powered water filtration systems are there. When we're looking at the favelas, which have poor infrastructure, which leads to difficulties for electricity and plumbing, as well as the disease that's running rampant because of no standard sanitation or proper water disposal systems. The probability of product success is pretty stable. The water purifier market in Brazil has shown a growth of over 10%. Basic water needs has increased 3%, and the increase to access basic sanitation has increased over 10% within that same period. So the market is there for clean drinking water as well as water purifying products. The final business plan That's the entry mode. The best possible entry mode for our product is going to be a joint venture. It is not as risky. Our firm can benefit from local partners who know the political and business system. Because the government is corrupt, this would definitely be a beneficial plus for us. And also we avoid kind of adverse government interference. Now, if you look at the bottom here, we have mineral extraction investment as well as electronic industries. Those are investments that are already taking place in Brazil, so those also can provide further opportunities for joint ventures. The market in Brazil has a GDP which is approximately 15,000. This isn't the greatest, but it's not the worst. The labor participation has been constant at 60%. Brazil has shown, though, an employment increase of about 5%, so that is promising for launching a new product or company overseas. The average wage for Brazil is just over 2,100 a month, whereas the minimum wage is 954 a month. So if we were to offer wages just below the average rate, it would still be greater than the minimum wage of Brazil. HR perspective, we do have to recognize some of the Brazilian holidays. Another thing we have to look at is healthcare. So in the Brazilian Constitution, everyone is guaranteed access to healthcare, including foreign residents. So this is definitely promising, but it also tells us that if we don't have the best ideal healthcare package, that they are willing to enroll into a private plan, whereas 47 million Brazilians have done so already. The Brazilian law requires Brazilian workers to have or are entitled to 22 days paid vacation. Brazil's also general elections are considered public holidays as well. So we have to track these national holidays. Also, if we're examining executives who are sent from headquarters to manage foreign operations in Brazil, I think there's two things that we have to consider. One thing we have to consider is the expatriate's long-term goals. If the expatriate's executive intends to work in Brazil temporarily and plans on returning to the home country to continue his or her career, then the compensation range definitely should be comparable to what they would make at home in the United States. Whereas an executive who's hired locally and has no intentions of leaving Brazil, I find the compensation package should reflect that cost of living there. And the last, summarize on the product. Summarize that Brazil's water system is on the decline with limited resources to water. What's also on the decline is the cost of solar decreasing each year. These portable solar filtration systems can be located in remote regions and also provide additional energy resources as well. Brazil is the fourth host economy in terms of FDI inflows, as well as showing a 10% increase for the water purification or water purifier markets. The opportunity for joint ventures with other investors as well as local companies seems promising. And it looks like we can keep wages and healthcare costs relatively low while remaining competitive. That's all for my summary and my presentation. With references, your feedback, comments, and questions. Thank you.